Chantal Coda, and I'm the coordinator for Safe and Healthy Schools. I do want to let everyone know, as you probably just saw on the screen, that we are recording this meeting for two reasons. One, so that you as participants can go ahead and view the recording at a later time, again, by yourself or with any relevant folks at your team. And I had several requests from folks who could not join us today, so we want to make sure that we have this accessible. Today, we are going to be presenting student data entry, an overview of reporting requirements. Next. This webinar will provide information on new and existing incident data reporting requirements, including what needs to be reported, how data should be reported, how to review the data submitted to the Utah Transcript Record Exchange, otherwise known as UTREX, and the upcoming school disciplinary and law enforcement action report. Next. Your presenters today are myself. I'm Chantal Coda. I am representing the Utah State Board of Education. I am the Safe and Healthy Schools Coordinator. Sergeant Jeremy Barnes is also presenting today. He is representing the Utah Department of Public Safety, and he is a safety school liaison with us here at USBE. We also have Willie Chen, who is with the Utah State Board of Education and is our school safety data analyst. Our learning intentions today are that participants will have an understanding of the school disciplinary and law enforcement action annual report, including any new reporting requirements that must be met. Participants will have an understanding of how to review incident data after it has been submitted to UTREX. And the success criteria for today is that learners will review current policies and practices for incident reporting to ensure accurate reporting practices in your local space. Next. The learning norms for today, so that we can get through the information that you will need to be most successful. So we ask that you write any questions in the chat, and presenters will answer them as we are able. And then at the end of this presentation, we will have a question and answer opportunity, and you will go ahead and ask that you raise the hand icon on the screen, and we'll take the questions as they come. So let's go ahead and start with an overview of why we collect data. So there are several reasons that we collect data. The number one reason is we really want to identify student needs. We look at data so that we can identify resources, and it really helps us to inform decision-making on funding and legislation, so that we are making sure that we are aligning any funding, legislation, and resources to the needs of students. As many of you who have been present and here with education for years, you know that there are several reports that require the use of data, and I've listed a few of them here. But the one that probably is jumping out to most of you is the last one, which is the School Disciplinary and Law Enforcement Action Report, which we're going to go to in depth today. Next. So again, for those of you who have been in your role or just in education, you're probably already aware of some of the existing LEA reporting requirements. So as you probably already know, in accordance with federal and state statutes, a record of incidents involving the following must be reported through UTREX to the Utah State Board of Education. So this would include any act resulting in an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or expulsion. Any assignment to an alternative school or alternative learning program and hearing officer removal, any incident resulting in referrals to police, court, or program, any indication if the student was part of a gang prevention program at the time of the incident, any indication if the incident was gang related, any use of emergency safety interventions as outlined in USBE Rule R277609, and then of course any incident of bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, and retaliation must be reported for all offenders as well as for victims. Next. So just to continue, again, as many of you know, this is not new information. These are existing requirements. But for any of the following infractions, when the student is removed from his or her regular educational setting for an extended period of time, regardless of the consequences signed, we want to make sure that we're reporting these incidents here. And so I won't go through and read them. You likely have your SIS set up to denote these different infractions. And again, these are all existing practices. But I want to get into really the heart of what we're going to talk about today, which includes that new report. So as many of you are aware, there are new LEA reporting requirements. So this includes the school disciplinary and law enforcement action report. And so what USBE Rule R277-912-2 states is that an LEA shall work with the superintendent and the relevant law enforcement agencies and school personnel to collect the following data for incidents that occurred on school grounds while school is in session or during a school-sponsored activity. So here we're looking at arrests of a minor, other law enforcement activities, disciplinary actions, and all other data. And to go on that more deeply, I'm going to now introduce Sergeant Jeremy Barnes to take us into a more in detail look at the reporting requirements. Jeremy?
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Sergeant Jeremy Barnes, Utah Department of Public Safety. I'm assigned to the Utah School Safety Center as the school safety liaison. So in 2021, in 2020, they updated the requirements for 53E 3516. They did change some different definitions. Beginning July 1st, 2023, state board shall develop an annual school disciplinary and law enforcement action report regarding the following incidents that occur on school grounds while school is in session or during a school-sponsored activity. This would include arrests of a minor, other law enforcement activities, and disciplinary actions. And this all comes out of the code 53E-3-516. It's a pretty lengthy read, but hopefully we can sum up some of the important details. I will also, if my contact information is not provided during this webinar, we can make sure that we can send it out so that everybody can contact me with any further questions. If I don't have the answer, I will get you to the person that has the answer. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The reporting elements that need to be included here are the number of arrests of a minor, including the reason why the minor was arrested. The number of law enforcement activities, including the following information for each incident, the reason for the other law enforcement activity, the type of other law enforcement activity used, the number of disciplinary actions imposed, including the reason for the disciplinary action, the type of disciplinary action, and the number of SROs that are employed within the LEA. Demographics of an individual who's subject to bullying, hazing, cyberbullying, or retaliation. Next slide. Definitions. This is where I really want to get to the meat and so that everybody's on the same page as far as what these definitions include. From the outset, I want it to be clear that as we were going through trying to get this taken care of, trying to make sure that this was the lift to be in line with what the legislative asks were. This is not to come down on the school resource officers. This is not to micromanage the school resource officers. This is to get a clear picture of what is going on inside the schools to enhance the relationship and the collaboration between the school resource officers, school administrators, and the overall school community. So the physical arrest flag is going to be for a physical arrest. This is indicates whether related to the incident the student was physically arrested. This means this is not a cite and release. This is not a call the parents to come get a student. This is a physical arrest. The individual was taken into custody and transported to another location, whether it be the JRC, the detention center. A physical arrest was made. Student was removed from the school. Search and seizure flag. This will also be required. It's an indicator of whether or not related to the incident the student was subject to a search and seizure by an SRO or law enforcement officer. This is a search and seizure conducted by a school resource officer. If the school administrator is pulling the SRO in for safety concerns and not conducting the search, if the administrator is conducting the search, this would not fall under that parameter. This is for the school resource officer actually facilitating a search and seizure that needs to be documented there. Criminal citation flag, indicator of whether related to the incident the student was issued a criminal citation by an SRO or law enforcement officer. This would be rather than being taken into physical custody, the individual is being released to citation, referral to juvenile or criminal court, depending upon the age of the student. One of the things that I missed in the beginning here is notice the information states that an SRO or law enforcement officer, these actions need to be documented whether or not the school resource officer employed by the agency assigned to the LEA through MOU is conducting that or not. If it is another law enforcement officer responding to the school, a patrol officer, anything like that, this would still fall under that parameter. So it's not just specific to the SRO within the school. It's any law enforcement officer that would be responding to the school for an incident. So criminal citation, the student was issued a criminal citation, again, referred to whether it be juvenile court or adult court for that. A non-criminal citation. This would be an indicator of whether related to the incident, the student was issued a ticket, non-criminal citation, or summons by an SRO law enforcement officer. This situation would include traffic citations on school campus or at a school-sponsored activity. This would also include, depending upon a peer court. I apologize. I lost my word there. A peer court or a youth court program they're not being referred to criminal court. However, they are being referred to a program. This would fall under that peer court, youth court type situation. Other law enforcement activity. This is vague in statute, and so they wanted to make sure it was defined. It was defined this year in the legislative session, so they updated the language. But this would be an open-ended field as the data report is being collected or completed. It would be an open-ended field in which additional law enforcement activities, if any, can be described. Some examples would include crisis intervention, mentorship, informal counseling, social welfare investigations, delinquency petitions, issuances of summons, referral to probation officer, etc. So if an officer was involved in a situation, but they didn't conduct a physical arrest, they weren't referring the individual to a court of jurisdiction, they weren't sending in peer court, youth court, it would fall under here. For example, I'll hit the referral to probation officer. If the law enforcement officer or the school resource officer knows that the individual is on court mandated probation, they can contact the probation officer, and that may be where it ends. That may be where the investigation ends, or that may be where the discipline, I don't want to say discipline, but the law enforcement interaction ends, is by that referral to the probation officer. It wouldn't meet any of the other categories. It would fall into this one. And then retaliation defined, an indicator of whether the student was a retaliation or alleged retaliation to any other incident. One thing I did want to go to is the other law enforcement activity defined in statute would include a significant law enforcement interaction with a minor that does not result in an arrest, including search and seizure by an SRO, which we already have defined, issuance of a criminal citation, which again, we already have defined, and filing a delinquency petition, or referral to a probation officer. So in statute, the definitions are broken down here. So hopefully everybody can understand that. Go ahead and move to the next slide if we would. Okay, I want to make sure we hit any of the questions here before I hand it over to Willie. From Russell down in Nebo, is the expectation that law enforcement officers are communicating with school administrators and that the schools will have the reporting responsibility if the action taken is not conducted by the SRO? So the expectation, Russell, that is a fantastic question. And the expectation of this is like I said, the intent of this was not to micromanage the school resource officers or the law enforcement officers responding to the schools. This was to get a clear picture of what's going on and promote the collaboration between law enforcement as well as the LEAs. And so the expectation would, yes, if an administrator knows that an incident is taking place on school grounds, that they're able to go to the law enforcement agency, the law enforcement officer, or the school resource officer and say, hey, statute states that we have to compile this report at the end of the year. I want to make sure that I'm getting the information that I need. I don't need the specific information about every detail that's going to go in the report or anything, but we're talking about incidents that are occurring on school grounds or during a school-sponsored event. Therefore, it falls under the jurisdiction of the LEA, and that law enforcement collaboration would absolutely be that expectation. Okay, go ahead and next slide. Okay, so I believe Willie Chen will take over from here.
Thank you, Sergeant Barnes. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Willie Chen. I am the School Safety Data Analyst for USPE. And today I'm just going to go over a general overview of reviewing incident data in UTREX, technical requirements, and more specific details. If you have questions concerning that, there will be a further session next week on Thursday. So just a little heads up, there's going to be quite a few acronyms. Most of you may know these, but I'm still going to go over them just to be on the same page. LEA is Local Education Agency. SIS, there's several student information systems that the incident data is recorded. The ones listed below are the predominantly used ones within the state. There are a few others, such as Sevier and Davis School District, that have their own systems. UTREX will stand for the Utah Transcript Record Exchange System. But I do want to distinguish between the I-1 and the I-2 record, and we will go into more detail in that in the later slides. Next slide, please. So some reporting requirements to be mindful of that are stated in the UTREX specification manual. The newest things to be mindful of, and it's in the second paragraph specifically. Again, we are adding retaliation data now and also information data on the victims. But every incident that does generate a removal from the student's regular education setting must be submitted to UTREX. All incidents that do not result in a removal should also be submitted to UTREX. Next. So in general, you're welcome to follow along as I go through the general process. Please note there may be some variations depending on your role in the LEA. So to access UTREX, you first need to go to the data gateway system. So there's a couple ways to go about it. You can go to the USPE homepage and scroll down to the data gateway tile and click it. And once you get to that tile, I recommend bookmarking it. That way you don't have to keep on doing that every time, and it'll be faster. Once you log in to the data gateway, or to log in, you do need to look in the top right corner and you'll click it. If you don't have access, you do need to contact your data gateway LEA admin. And then you'll be needing to assign a role that has access to the reports. Your LEA may create a custom role that has access to the necessary discipline reports. Next slide. A little bit more about these roles. Currently, there are 2 default roles in Data Gateway that have access to both discipline reports. There's the UTREX LEA user or school user equivalent, the UTREX restricted LEA user or school user equivalent. In addition, there is also the special education LEA user or school user role that has access to the discipline incident summary for SpEd. LEAs can also set up custom roles with access to just the discipline reports. So again, make sure you work with your LEA admin to determine the most appropriate role for you in accessing these. And again, this is where the variation is going to be a little different if you're following along, depending on your role. When you start accessing the UTREX incident reports, in general, once you've logged in and you have access, at the top of the screen in the red bar, you'll either see My Tools or UTREX. So this is a screenshot of my role. And for me, I will click the UTREX drop-down menu and click on the Reports link. Special education LEA users will click on UTREX Special Education Reports in the My Tools pull-down menu. So usually in one of those 2, and then you'll click Reports. Once you've clicked that, you're going to see various links, again, depending on your access. And so here's an example of what you may see. You will want to go into the year-round reports section, since there are a lot of year-round reports, and specifically look for these 2 that are highlighted. Either the discipline incident summary, and that report includes aggregate accounts by school of all incident discipline data, or you may also see the discipline incident summary for SpEd, includes student label data. Next. So I'm now going to go into a little bit more detail about the differences between the two reports that you're going to see. For the discipline incident summary report, these are non-special education students. You can use this report to review and verify accuracy of incident and discipline data submitted from your school information system to UTREX. The file will include total counts by school of data submitted through the incident record, or I1, and the incident association record, I2. Next. Some frequently asked questions that happens when you're looking at the information presented in the summary. What's the difference between a distinct incident and a student incident? A single or distinct incident can involve multiple students, and a single student can have multiple infractions per incident. Thus, student incident counts may exceed distinct incident counts. In addition, each student can have only one primary infraction, but can have between 0 and 4 secondary infractions. So that's a lot of verbiage. An example below, let's say you have a distinct incident count in column E, and you'll notice there's a 1. But if you go to column G, student incident primary infraction count is 10. So what could have happened here is, let's say the distinct incident was a fight, but you have 10 students that were in the fight. And then in column H, where student incident secondary infraction count is 3, maybe 3 of the students of the 10 in that fight may have had a banned substance on them that contributed to the fight, such as alcohol. So that's where you're going to see some of these potentially different numbers and what they mean. Next. Another frequently asked question is, why are there more counts by weapon reported field than of the weapon student infraction type? So if you'll notice in column AC on the far left, column AC is the count of weapon as the primary infraction type. However, all weapons are included in weapon reported counts, which are columns AD through AK, even if the primary infraction type is not the weapon. So again, let's use that fight example. Let's say in a fight where a student used a textbook as a weapon, the primary infraction is still going to be fighting. So the weapon student infraction type is going to be 0 because, again, the primary infraction is fighting. However, the weapon reported, in this case, it's going to be another object since the textbook will be 1. So again, notice in AC, it's 0 because a textbook was not the primary infraction. But in column AJ, 1 for the textbook. How can you review your data for the new annual school disciplinary law and enforcement action report? I recommend looking at these 4 columns once you've gotten access to the data, specifically AU, AV, AW, and column AX, which is the counts of physical arrest, search and seizure, criminal citation, and non-criminal citation. Retaliation data is not being collected in UTREX yet. We expect this by the December 1st submission. After we start collecting it in UTREX, you will be able to see the retaliation totals in the discipline incident summary report. Now, for the discipline incident summary report for SpEd, use this report to review and verify accuracy of incident discipline data submitted for students with disabilities. This file, however, includes student level data, and on each incident in which a special education student was involved, and the student was suspended or expelled, and a sum of the total number of discipline days a student has received statewide. Special education directors can use this report year-round to determine if services need to be provided to a student being disciplined or to track disproportionality. For additional training regarding special education on the discipline incident summary for SpEd, please contact LEA Reporting. She is a great resource and she can give you a lot of information on that. Otherwise, it's fairly similar to the discipline report. If you have other like general questions or training requests on incident and discipline reporting, please contact me. Otherwise, again, for special education discipline incident data questions, please contact Malia Govena. There are some next steps as well. And I believe I'm turning over to Chantel.
Yes, thank you so much, Willie. Appreciate that overview. So let's talk a little bit about next steps. So it's important that you review procedures for incident reporting at the LEA level, just to ensure that the proper people have the right training and that communication is taking place. Ensure that relevant staff is trained on incident reporting requirements. Again, we want to ensure that we have the most accurate data for this upcoming report, because again, we're very cognizant of the end user, which is the student. And without accurate incident data, it really makes it challenging to inform any type of funding, any type of legislation, or resources that can then be provided to you at the LEA level. You'll want to make sure that your SIS, which is the system you use at the LEA level, meets the technical requirements as per UTREX specifications. Again, you have a manual for reference, and there will be an upcoming webinar next week that we'll talk about here in just a moment that you can join for additional information there. And also, we have sent out on the a couple of the listservs, as well as just through SpEd, there is a survey that is out right now that will be open for a couple of weeks, and I'll include the link in the follow-up. That just helps us to better understand here at USBE what some of those barriers could be to incident reporting. That helps us to better understand the resources, trainings, webinars, or just personal support that we can provide and technical assistance around any needs that you may be having at the local level as well. So as I mentioned, there will be an incident data entry comprehensive training. It will be held on September 22nd at 1:30. We'll send that through all the listservs, as well as contact information for presenters here. Some of you had asked about slides. We will send out the slide deck as well as a link to that survey, again, which is just really helpful. Many of you have already completed it, so please don't feel that you need to complete it again. But again, just helps us to address barriers and things of that nature. So what I'd like to do now is just open it up to questions, comments, or feedback. I'd love to hear any questions that you maybe still have about incident reporting and or this annual report, or really, anything to do with incident data, and maybe any feedback around upcoming webinars that you'd like, or any type of training or resources that we can be working on here at USBE to help better support you. So if you'll just use the hand icon, we'll go ahead and call out in order of your question.
Carolyn, go ahead. Can you unmute?
Yeah, is there a guideline on the length of time the student is removed from their educational setting? That then it has to be inputted into incidences?
I can speak to that a little bit, although I don't know that I have the full answer to that. There is one bit of Utah code that advises that certain types of behavioral incidents are supposed to raise to the level of a out-of-school suspension, and others are supposed to raise to the level of an expulsion. And and then I think the law also goes into a little bit of what's allowed as far as the length of the removal. So I guess maybe the answer then is we have partial guidelines that should help you with that. There might also be requirements for your LEA policy. Chantel, maybe you or your team could speak more to that.
I was referring to more like, yes, suspensions are fine, but if, let's say, a student is sent to ISS for one period in a secondary, or a half a period, or 10 minutes because they're acting up at the end of the period, does that still go into incidences?
So yeah, great question, Carolyn. So the technical response is if it's considered in-school suspension as per your LEA policy, it does need to be reported, any type of suspension, whether it's out of school or in school. That being said, I would look back at your LEA policies because of course we all know there are times when it's just safer for the student and safer for others to maybe just take a break from the classroom. So if it's a break and you just need a safe space for that kiddo to go to finish work, or just a quiet space, and it's more of an intervention, then that does not need to be reported. So I would invite you to look back at your LEA policies in terms of state code and And what we have, it's anything that's in school or out of school suspension. But if it's an intervention, that looks a little bit different. Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you so much.
And then from the technical side of things, UTREX allows reporting down to 1/10 of a day increments for the removals. So if you don't have to report it as a full day removal, if they missed one period, you just do a calculation to figure out what the closest 1/10 of a day you would report that the removal lasted.
I just also wanted to add, this is Jeremy with DPS, that the statute for the law enforcement side of this, the law enforcement involvement there is no link between school removal, days missed, anything like that. If you have an incident where law enforcement is involved, sometimes the SRO or law enforcement officer may issue a citation and the kid's not ever removed from school. And so I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that the law enforcement requirement does not have a direct link to whether or not they're removed from school. So I wanted to clarify that.
Great. What additional questions can we answer? What feedback do you have on maybe upcoming trainings or support that we can provide?
Hey, Jeremy, can I ask you to clarify on that whole, sometimes they're cited, they're not removed from school, that type of thing. It just seems that sometimes the information is brought to the SRO and then they bring it to the school, and then someone comes in and meets with the kids for off-campus stuff, but you still want that reported as people interviewed that kid at school. How are we handling that?
Negative. To my understanding, the statute is for anything that happens on school grounds or any school sponsored event. So in the incident in the situation that you're referring to, Sharon, where an incident occurs off campus, the law enforcement agency either contacts the SRO or the law enforcement agency comes into the school to interview the student. That would not be included in this because it's that school discipline part. And I guess to really kind of make the clarity, we've been pushing the collaboration, right? And we want to make sure that school resource officers, the national best practice for SROs is that they're not involved in any sort of school discipline. And so that's kind of where this is stemming from is it's if there's something that happens in school, okay, how was the SRO involved? Was it part of the suspension, or what happened in conjunction with that? So if it's happening outside of the school and other officers are responding to handle it or investigate it, that would not be considered part of this. It would be specific for those incidents that are happening on grounds or off campus at school sponsored.
Thank you.
Did that answer it?
Yes, but sometimes that happens. So I just wanted clarity while we're all here.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow up a little bit on Carolyn's questions because I want to make sure that I'm crystal clear on this. So if we have a behavior incident that would fall under the suspension or expulsion, we report that as an incident regardless of whether we actually suspended or expelled the kid, or is it only if we suspended or expelled the kid? My reading of the law was the former, where it was, if it trips it, we report regardless of what we did. Just want to make sure I'm reading that properly.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. It looks like we've responded to all questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and wrap up at this point. We'll go ahead and stay on, those of us presenting, for just a few minutes in case there are any individual questions that we can help support with or technical assistance. Again, the recording and slide deck will be posted on the Safe and Healthy Schools under the events and training page. And we'll also send out follow-up information in terms of the upcoming webinar through the listserv. So make sure you're signed up for that. I know that there are different listservs, so make sure that you're on that. If not, of course, reach out to me or Willie Chen or Sergeant Barnes, and we can help you out with that. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today and all the work you're doing for the kids.